Show of force. The Saudis strike to end a siege and calm oil market jitters. Pressure tactics by the U.S. Army to get inactive reservists back on duty. The church and politics. Our new poll shows what Catholic voters think. And the battle begins for summer box office supremacy.
This is the CBS Evening News with John Roberts.
And good evening. We're going to begin tonight with new concerns about the security of America's oil supply. In Saudi Arabia today, commandos stormed a resort complex in the oil-producing region of Khobar, where terrorists were holding hostage dozens of foreign workers. 22 people, including one American, were killed in that raid. Al-Qaeda today claimed responsibility for the hostage-taking, raising new fears that the heart of Saudi Arabia's economy and the engine that drives America's is now a target. Richard Roth reports for us tonight.
Helicopters dropped commandos on the building's rooftop and gunfire echoed through the foreigners' compound in Khobar. Saudi officials say the rescue was launched when it became clear Muslim militants had begun killing hostages they'd seized when they started their terror attack with a shooting spree 25 hours earlier. One of the gunmen was captured, but 3 others got away. Residents said the gunmen who stormed through the complex of offices and homes of foreigners in the oil business were dressed to look like guards hired to protect the compound. The attackers told them Westerners and Americans, and only non-Muslims, were their targets. A statement and a tape on an Islamic website purportedly from Al-Qaeda's leader in the Saudi region claimed responsibility for the attack and promised more, until it said crusaders are expelled from the land of Islam. Though some 6 million foreigners work in their oil industry, Saudi officials say there's no new threat to oil production. But supply is not the only pressure on oil prices.
There is a counterinsurgency quasi-war going on in one of the other major oil producers, Iraq, at the moment. And next door you have suicide attacks on people working in the oil industry. It's not surprising that people get jittery.
But industry analysts say $40 a barrel oil already includes the cost of that anxiety. So far, attacks in Saudi have been far away from heavily guarded production facilities. As long as the infrastructure's kept safe, say experts, the oil market should be stable. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
Foreigners were the target of another attack today, this one an ambush on a highway in the northern part of Baghdad. President Bush has warned the frequency of such attacks will most likely increase leading up to the scheduled transition of power in Iraq at the end of June. But there's a new hitch in naming a government to hand power to tonight. David Hawkins has the latest on the politics and the violence.
Witnesses say the attackers dragged several Western-looking men out of their cars while others managed to escape. After the ambush, a mob set the vehicles on fire and cheered in celebration. And while U.S. forces continue to skirmish with Shiite rebels in and around holy cities in the south, in Baghdad there's a behind-the-scenes political battle being fought over the makeup of Iraq's transitional government, set to assume power at the end of next month. Members of Iraq's governing council say they're being pressured to name Adnan Pachachi as the country's president. Pachachi, an 81-year-old former exile, is thought to be America's choice because he wants the U.S. military to stay on indefinitely. The coalition spokesman denies that it's playing favorites.
And we are not pressuring or engaging anyone, urging them to go one direction versus another.
A majority of the council wants this man to get the job instead, Sheikh Ghazi al-Yawar. He has broad-based support amongst Iraq's political and religious factions, but he's been critical of the U.S. occupation.
The difficulty of the U.S. position right now is to keep coalition forces in Iraq under U.S. and British command, but at the same time giving the perception that the transfer of authority really is taking place.
U.S. officials say they're taking a hands-off approach to the selection of Iraq's new leaders, but not many Iraqis are buying it. Most believe that when their new government is named, it'll have American fingerprints all over it. David Hawkins, CBS News, Baghdad.
May is proving to be another deadly month for U.S. forces in Iraq. With 1 day left, 66 soldiers or Marines have died. Of those, 22 were from reserve units, units that are bearing an increasing burden in Iraq. With no exit strategy in sight, the Pentagon is eager to keep up the numbers in the ready reserves. But as Randall Pinkston reports, the recruiting tactics have left some reservists feeling burned.
I finally got my freedom back.
After nearly 4 years in the Army, including time in Iraq, Jason Pariza was honorably discharged and placed on inactive ready reserves. He thought his active military obligation was done until he received a notice saying all inactive ready reserve soldiers would be involuntarily transferred.
Trying to get my life in order, and all of a sudden I'm finding out they're trying to stick their nose back in my life.
To avoid being involuntarily assigned to a unit that might be sent back to Iraq, the Army counselor promised to help Pariza transfer to the unit of his choice. The Army now says the memo was a miscommunication, that the intention was to review reserve files for possible but not definite assignment based on the Army's needs. But that's not the message thousands of vets like Eric Schmidt received from letters and phone calls from military recruiters.
The impression I got was either join one of the units he represents or you go overseas.
And based on that impression, Schmidt voluntarily joined an active reserve unit.
I've been hoodwinked into signing something I shouldn't have.
Administration critics say the controversy is far more than a misunderstanding.
It's another indication of very poor planning for this whole war against Iraq.
With 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the U.S. military is stretched thin. Some troops are already forced to take longer enlistments, with Guard and Reserve units bearing more of the load.
They hadn't planned on keeping so many troops in Iraq so long, and they put pressure on the recruiters here to get people and get them quickly.
Mistake or not, it worked. Enlistments for many active reserve units were up in May. Randall Kingston, CBS News, New York.
The White House confirmed today that President Bush has mounted a trophy of the Iraq War in a study next to the Oval Office. Saddam Hussein's pistol. Saddam had the gun with him when he was captured, and U.S. soldiers who found him presented it to Mr. Bush. It was thundering today at the White House. Members of the Rolling Thunder motorcycle group riding up for a personal presidential tour of the Oval Office. The group supports veterans' causes and has endorsed Mr. Bush for re-election. A new CBS News poll out tonight finds that Democrat John Kerry enjoys overwhelming support among Catholic voters, which makes it particularly ironic that Kerry has recently run afoul of church doctrine because of his support for abortion rights. And Kerry is not the only one. Sharon Alfonsi tonight on parish politics and punishment.
In Chicago today, Catholics who openly support same-sex marriage were denied communion at the Holy Name Cathedral. New Jersey Governor James McGreevey knows what it's like.
It was at a funeral service, and I went up to receive communion in a long line. And the priest didn't offer me communion. He blessed me.
A Camden, New Jersey bishop decided the governor isn't eligible for communion because he's divorced and supports abortion rights, even though he's received communion from the Pope.
Sacraments shouldn't be a political statement, it's a religious statement.
And 78% of Catholics polled by CBS agree. They said they don't think it's appropriate for bishops to refuse communion to elected officials who differ with official positions of the church. People like presidential hopeful John Kerry.
Then there very well could be a backlash for this.
Father Thomas Reese is the editor of the Catholic magazine America.
Kerry may get a sympathy vote out of it.
Then there's the threat from Colorado Bishop Michael Sheridan. He says he'll deny communion to any Catholic who votes for a politician who supports abortion rights, stem cell research, or same-sex marriage.
They are also issues which are things that are intrinsically evil.
What's frustrating in all of this is it's as if certain bishops are beginning to pick and choose off a menu. Body of Christ.
Most Catholics think it's a bad idea. 61% of those polled say they don't think it's appropriate for religious leaders to urge people to vote for a candidate.
What are we going to do? Get a sin detector like you have in the airports?
Leaving some Catholics to wonder who should go through the detectors, the parishioners or the bishops themselves. Sharon Alfonsi, CBS News, New York.
Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, when fingerprinting points to the wrong suspect. And later, will Harry Potter's wizardry cast a spell on the box office?